Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Show Up with Camron Gran. If you're wondering why I have a white wall behind me, it's because I've moved into my new place, but I haven't set everything up yet. So, if you're watching this on YouTube, that will be changed. And as we dive into this episode, just a reminder, I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody going on his own mental health journey, giving you guys little tips and tricks that I have used on my own. But as I always say, advocate for yourself, try things out. It's like trial and error, because there are things that will work for me in my brain that won't work for other people, and that's fine. It's all about keying in to what works best for us. Now, I'm excited to be at my new place, but I have a back injury, which I've spoken about before on this channel, and because of that fact, I am kind of doing a slow move, which is good because it gives me more time to move, but it's bad because I also am feeling it right now, and I had to take a break from moving for the last couple of days because I'm basically moving a lot of the heavy stuff, and I was just like, oh, okay, my body hurts a lot. We have 28 days of February. Let's make sure that as we move from one place to the other, that nothing becomes a hiccup, and we're prepared to make this transition. I will say I'm really excited. I have plans with what to do as my backdrop moving forward. So if you aren't watching it, feel free to go over to the Gran Central YouTube channel. I would love you guys to see. But I also decided that I think I want to do a little bit of a check-in, mostly because I'm going to do a short episode a day because I have a lot of stuff going on, and it's a very stressful week for me and a lot of other people. But I just thought it was important to do a check-in because it can feel very isolating out here, and I think that even though I end this show by telling you guys to show up for yourself, sometimes an important thing is just recognizing what your limits are every day. And my thing is I'll tune into certain things for a certain point, and then I'm going to have to shut it off, and then tune again the next day, and then figure out what to do from there. And those limitations are very important, especially if you're like me, who gets overloaded very easily, or who also, right now I don't have a bouncing board anywhere. It's kind of me and myself. I have friends, and so I'll turn to them sometimes, but also they got stuff going on in their life, and they can't solve everything. Unfortunately, I wish they could. But what we can do is just remind each other that it's take it day by day, figure out how to proceed. That's all really you can do. Something that I am trying to do with the move is set myself up for success, because before, I'm sure the most common way of moving is you grab all your stuff, you throw it in boxes, and you throw it in your car, and you take all your stuff from one place to the other, and then once everything's at the other place, then you start unpacking. Me, because of my limited resources, being a little broke guy on the internet and at my job, I pretty much am hey, I only have a limited amount of boxes, so pack them all up, bring them to the new place, unpack them all, and then bring those same boxes back to the other place, because you don't have time nor money to basically go out and go box shopping. Because it used to be when I was a child that you could show up at any store and just ask them for boxes and they'd give them to you, and then now you have to pay money for boxes, which is so funny to me because I used to work at Lowe's and other home improvement places, and so once you open the box, something comes in, they throw it out. And so I don't know. They're not willing to recycle and help. Is interesting that's where we're at now, but it's just been interesting. I am constantly surprised by the new things that I figure out by my new place, and I'm not upset by any of those things. But it was more of oh, I saw the place, I looked around, really enjoyed it, and then I thought, because I was going from a higher number to a lesser number, that my place was actually going to be a lot smaller. But the thing is, I have a lot of stuff in my old apartment just out for everybody to see, and this place, the square footage, may look smaller, but there's a lot more deep to the closets, and like there is actually like a hall closet where you normally put towels and stuff. I could put all my towels on one shelf, and there's like 7 shelves, but the shelves are so deep and so sturdy that you really could put anything over there, not have to pay for storage or like organize it so it's actually very productive. Like I'm going to use one of the shelves just to like stock up on cans and just like make sure, because I am in Minnesota and we are living in a weird time right now, that I have food in case I can't go out and shop. I'm also trying to eat healthier because moving shouldn't be as hard as it is for me. And that's not from a place of judgment. That's coming from like, oh, you did this a year ago and it didn't feel this hard. But when I moved last time, I had a lot less stuff. And then I kind of realized the habit of somebody who is a minimalist is like, once you're in the space, fill up. And then once you leave, take what you actually care about. And I'm trying to be more responsible, because usually what I would do is I'm like, oh, well, actually, it's not even me trying to be responsible. You know how I moved away to go to college, and then people decided to take it upon themselves to raid my stuff and steal it from me. And then after that, my dad passed away, and he had some of the stuff that he gave me he was holding because I hadn't come back to my hometown to pick them up yet. And instead of asking me, hey, is this for Cameron? Or, any of those questions that you normally ask, they were just like, oh, well, he passed away and this is the stuff that's here, so it must be like free reign for anybody. And we all have like litigation and like the monotony that you go through when somebody passes away, being like, what's yours, what's theirs, what can you grab from somebody? I think it's the very despicable how people treat like the people's items once they've passed away. But the thing that I got irritated about the most was there's a difference between somebody leaving behind stuff and somebody gifting you something and holding on to it until you're out of college so you can pick them up. And nobody would listen to me, and they just thought I was trying to claim things that weren't really mine. But I had this like really good like radio system that it was a threefer. It had like 5 CD places, and then like a tape cassette place, and then like enough speakers to make a surround sound like music vibe. You can tell I don't listen to music a lot because of the way I'm describing it, but it was something I was really like happy that my dad gifted me. And people just took it. And then when I told them, yeah, that was for me, he gave it to me, and it was in my room up till the point I graduated and moved to New York. But I didn't say, here, Dad, have this back. And people just looked at me like, what do you expect me to do? And I'm like, well, I expect you to return the items that you stole from me. But apparently that basic, right isn't something other people agree with. Not to vent out. Part of me is talking about this to vent out some frustration I have in other places. For instance, I have food in my new apartment, but like, I already talked last week about the fact that I moved in and I had been like, I went shopping and I grabbed all this food that's like frozen, mostly because it's healthier to eat vegetables that are frozen than it is from a can. And I've been trying to eat more vegetables because it's a good way to fill up the plate because the vegetables are very low calorie. And if you fill up half your plate with vegetables, it looks like you're eating a lot. And for some reason that does something for my brain, so it helps me get full faster. But I had bought, like, my freezer is full of stuff, but I don't have a microwave here. But the other thing I don't have yet, because I've been doing this in installments, is I don't have any of my cooking gear. And what's funny about this place that is a new revelation to me is I've had gas stoves before, and like the level of heat in a gas stove is extremely hot. You have to be careful what you put into it. I turned on the stove once here and I was cooking eggs, and I was like warming the pan because I've been learning that, but I did not bring any like the normal stuff that you use to like make sure that it stays loose in the pan rather than getting burnt right away with like oil or like butter. But I was like, I've cooked eggs before without butter and it's been fine. But the electric stove in my new apartment is so hot, you can feel it on your face when you're cooking in it. and I've never had an electric stove be that hot. Like, if I took the pan off, you still felt the heat wafting from like those little burners. It's not a Bunsen burner because that's the thing that you use like a lighter to light up, that you put potion vials or science, little tubes over to like make a chemical process happen. I know what a Bunsen burner is, but don't take my word. I'm not a scientist. But it was just crazy to me because I've never actually experienced an electric stove be that hot. And I'm watching a lot of like Food Network, and they're like, make sure you're aware of how high your flame is or how much heat you're putting into the pan. And I'm going to have to now make sure that I'm aware of that, because if you're not paying attention for 1 second, anything will burn. Like, I barely put my eggs because I was making like an egg sandwich, and I had barely put it in the pan, and it started like popping. And I was like, wow, it's popping without oil. That's crazy that the pan got that hot for it to like instantly hit and then pop. So, trial and error. We learn as we go. I'm really excited because I'm excited to move from one apartment to the other, just because I've lived in Minnesota for 5 years now, and I've always been in the same area, and there are things about that area that remind me of a harder time in my life. And I don't know if anybody else has this where well, I hope you do, because everyone's like, thank God for hometowns or something, where like you haven't been somewhere in a long time, and then you walk in or you drive through and you're instantly reminded by that like mindset and that vibe you had while living there. And that's kind of what I'm experiencing now, is like, when I was going to either stay at my new place with the rent raising or move to a cheaper one, so I could save up to move like I've been planning after I graduate. And then I realized, the benefit is no hard move this year of staying, but then you're staying in an environment that isn't good for you for longer. And you can get a fresh start without any reminders of the thing you're trying to forget and leave behind. And I think that's a very important lesson to, I guess, give yourself grace for. It's not that like certain areas of town aren't bad. Like, for instance, when I was living in New York City, I always walked a certain way to get home, or walked to school a certain way, until, again, the random time during broad daylight, probably around 9 a.m., some random guy just walked up to me, punched me in the face, and then turned and just kept walking like no big deal. And I was like, what is happening? What? And then I was like, what face was I making? Why would he have the urge to punch me? And then I talked to people when I finally got to school, and then they're like, yeah, it's not normal for someone to just walk up and punch you in the face without any kind of like yelling or altercation happening. But that did happen to me. Anybody walking around New York, even though it's irritating, if you're new to New York, I always say, for the best safety, walk where the tourists are walking, because they are the streets that are the most heavily monitored by police. Because otherwise you'll think, I'm going to save time. I'm on 31st Street, but I'm at like the east end of the city. I need to walk straight down a couple of miles to go to the west end. And you're like, that's no big deal. It's fine. And then you're cutting time, but then you're like, that's strange. Nobody is on this street. It's super dark here. And then you're like, that's strange. There's like a guy in a random, like, just like a hat and nothing else up the road. And then you're just like, that's strange. Now there's like a bunch of people here like that. And then you're like, I live on this street, but I've never seen this kind of stuff. And it's the funniest thing in New York. Is like, you can literally go up one block and be in an entire new world, and then or in a bad situation. And so I just like went along with the vibe, and like, yeah, sorry, I can't stay with your, like, there's a bunch of people that were naked and on stuff. And I was just like, yeah, you guys have the time of your life. Ironically enough, this was the first night I moved into a new apartment, and I had a roommate, and I walked in, and I'm like, you will never believe what I just encountered up the road. And he didn't, which I don't blame him, because it's very odd to just stumble upon a street full of naked people on drugs. But it was a lesson learned. Just about like how unpredictable like things can get in the city. But also when you move so much around the city and then you are so close to places you've lived before, it's also good like wiping the slate clean. Because like I can still go to where I'm currently living. There are like it's very easy to get there. It's not far. And that's kind of what I liked. Like where I live now is closer to my work, so it saves time in the morning. And something that I'm trying to convince my brain to do, which if you're like me, sounds insane. Like if you have work at 7:30 and it takes you 10 minutes to get to work, if you get up at 7 and then take a shower and then dress, you'll probably be ready by 7:15 or 7:20. My brain is like, no. We don't trust a 30-minute window. Let's get up at 6 and like get up and be prepared to go to work. And I'm like, you're no fun. That's like so much extra work. I could literally like speed run this. Like I've crammed right before a major test and I've used every available minute possible. And so all I have time for is to make sure I get there. And if something bad happens, we're just going to act like that's not a possibility in a world full of things outside of our control. But that's kind of what happened. And that's the game I've been playing at my new place. Knowing I'm so close to work, and now I'm trying to figure out if I turn left or right, which way gets me there quicker. But also, I'm on a higher floor. And again, I think this place just runs hot naturally because in New York, you have a radiator, and it's like a hip level of a radiator, and when it turns on, you know it's on because there's knocking happening. But here I have a ground heater, and like it's middle of winter, and so I'm like, I should have that on, but it's hard to have the heater and the AC on at the same time because thank God this place has both that I can use. But if I leave the AC on and the heater on, it just gets super hot still. And then so I'm like, I'll just open the window, and then it gets freezing, and I'll close the window. 5 minutes later, it's hot again. So it's just like, wow, this place runs hot. Check. I am trying to become more productive, which is why I've been doing a lot more night routines. And then I want to make sure that I start doing a to-do list. Like, these are the things that must get done tomorrow. And then after those things are done, I can move on to other things. My setup for school now is kind of like I have like a wall of monitors because I'm an animation. Like that's what I'm going to school for. So like to make my life easier, I have like a wall of monitors, but then I can't see anything outside this like little octagon. Well, half an octagon, whatever you call that. So I can focus on what needs to be focused on, and then I also want to install things to make it so you guys get a little bit more production than I've been doing in the past, and that's important to me because I value A, your guys' time, B, trying to advocate for showing up for yourself, and also the benefits of DBT in general. Dialectical behavioral therapy is not. I think it moves beyond therapy, in my opinion, because everyone thinks of therapy as something trying to work upon, like, this thing that you're going through in your life, which therapy is, and you can use the therapist for that when you're going through a hard time and you need somebody to talk to. So that's still a good avenue to go through, but dialectical behavioral therapy is more about reconditioning your brain's pathways so that way you can catch thoughts in action. And I honestly wish that, because since we have such an emphasis on PE, physical education, I wish that like part of like physical education, which is all about like your body being good and set and like you being ready for whatever you need as you become an adult and and as you go through puberty, both of those things at the same time. And DBT is kind of like how to separate what's going on in your body from what your like thoughts are, and like it's also a way of separating from your emotions, because like our bodies do things, our emotions do things, and then we're kind of the other three. It's like there's a circle, and if you put it into 3/4, 3 halves, I don't know what you call that, 3 slices. There's a word for that, but I don't know what it is. You need all three to make a whole, but it's also important to know how to step outside. Because I think a lot of times, especially when you're young, your emotions are so heightened because of puberty that you don't know how to separate. And if you started like teaching like DBT in school, I think it would lead to a lot better, like, not only maturity growing up, but also a way of just being able to separate yourself from what's going on. Like, if you are being bullied, processing that from like, how can I change that circumstance, rather than believing a bully because they're in your face that what they say is reality. And usually kids eventually will get to that, but they're not trained that way. And I think the reason why they're not trained that way in school is because there is a benefit of the doubt when it comes to parents, that, oh, we're teaching our children logic. And you can teach your children whatever logic that you want, but like, critical thinking is important, and like knowing how to process facts and then like take those facts and run them through what your values are, and then before you speak, have a takeaway about how you feel when you went through your core values. Because I think that like that a little like pathway through our brain might make for a better day and like years of high school and middle school. Because high school wasn't that bad for me, because I think high school is like when you can start to separate into the things that you enjoy the most, so then you find more like-minded individuals. Whereas middle school, like, they introduce like electives and stuff, but you're still kind of, these are your core classes, these are your core, like, you have to do all these things, and then you get an elective or two. At least when I went, that's what it was like. But you're kind of still forced to do like this mainline thing with people. And then I got more freedom in high school to like choose what I want and have more control over my schedule. For instance, I love choir, I love band, and I love theater. And it's my school, when I went, only had 4 classes you could take per semester. Those classes were an hour and a half long. And so if you have to do a math class and a science class, you probably only have time for like one elective and then another required class. I was like, well, I don't need to talk to people about science. I don't need to talk to people about Spanish. I will take the online courses like at home, and then do band, choir, jazz band, and music theory for my 4-hour-and-a-half classes during the day, where I'm talking, interacting with people, because those people are people that I respect and who are also passionate about the things that I'm passionate about. And like, Spanish is cool. Again, I learned from my Spanish courses that my brain learns patterns faster than like what things mean. Like, blanco means white, and I know that, but like, instead of processing that and learning how to like say things about that, because I used Rosetta Stone, and Rosetta Stone is all about repetition, but you have, like, if I use Rosetta Stone, have to be like, make sure you're actually spending the time to understand how they're manipulating like sentence structure, and like how different circumstances like require you to use different dialogues, especially with Spanish, because there's formal, and then there's like masculine and feminine pronunciations, and like learning what circumstances you use which, and it's just a very interesting dynamic to kind of like navigate as you move through that. But that's all to say that my brain recognizes patterns very quickly, and so going through school, I kind of like went to other classes, but I couldn't tell you what I learned, to be honest, because I learned the pattern faster than what the pattern meant. So, but I used to judge myself about that, but now that I'm aware of it, I'm like, hey, you have this thing that your brain does. How can we learn things so I'm actually taking time to actually like make sure it's retained in long-term memory rather than being forgotten instantly? And something that, if you're like me and you love stories, that I am trying to break out of, but it's so hard because I love reading and rereading books that I love, is something that I have taught myself to do, which is good for enjoying stories that you love over and over again, but it's not good to use all the time. And that is, I will download a story like in my brain, like, oh, I've processed it. I've gone along with the characters, and I could read Twilight all the way through, take a deep breath, process what my emotions about reading Twilight were, and then reset my brain so I had never read Twilight, and then in those moments, like, reread Twilight again, even though I just read it, if that makes sense. And like, that's a trick I've done, and now I'm like, well, now you can't do that. Like, you can't just forget everything just so you have the experience of something for the first time again. Which is kind of where what that desired outcome was for me, because if you forget things easily, sometimes big things slip through the cracks. So for me, it's all about like, oh, how can I retain things that are important and like dissect through things that are not. And it's okay to forget the things that aren't important, but make sure if you're forgetting something, it's because it's not important and not because you're just trying to delete things from your brain. Because there's some things that I don't think you should experience for the first time again. I am bad with finances. I don't want to go back to the first time that kind of screwed me over, if that makes sense. It's like, it's good to relearn lessons or be willing to have a cup that's always willing to be full, rather than as though it could be overflowed at any second. And I love to learn, but I kind of turn that off for myself, and I'm trying to turn that switch back on. You turn it off like a light switch, from the Book of Mormon, the musical on Broadway. You can listen to that song on your own time if you really want to, but it's really all about like, oh, when things get hard or things get weird or things become too natural, you just unplug and you act like you're not seeing it. And what that does is it leads to bad behavior being thrown your way and people thinking that you're okay with it because you're not saying anything about it. And if you were saying something about it, then maybe I would do the energy to become a less crappy of a person. And it's not my responsibility to make you less crappy. And that's something that took me time to learn, and or make exceptions for the way people treated me, and they're just not realizing they're doing it. And I'm like, well, just because I'm not realizing it doesn't mean that I don't have the right to point out that it's not okay to treat somebody this way, and it's not okay to treat me this way. And if they're upset that I am going to walk out of their dinner party or their movie experience or if somebody's upset that you're planning to walk out on something because you're upset, then they should really be asking why they have to go to a level that upsets you rather than respect the boundaries that exist in today's world. Like, if I say something that upsets you and you don't say anything, then that's on you, because some people aren't aware that you're upset by something. But that's something I give grace to people that I don't know and I haven't talked about things with them before. But if I say certain things upset me, and then you continue to do those things, before I'm like, well, their opinion, I guess, it means more than my opinion, because that's why I'm not continuing to call them out, or I'm staying in these unwelcome and unhappy situations, because that's what you do with people, because they're not willing to take the brunt of being hurt. And now I'm like, no, if we're going to be in the same room, then everyone deserves to be happy. And if we can't make everybody happy, then I'm not going to stay in this room, because I don't have time to be miserable for your benefit. Me being miserable is not okay for your happiness. And that's something that I think more and more people are waking up to, is the fact that we can compromise. We can come to these agreements with each other. But those agreements are founded upon by respect. And I am a firm believer in boundaries. I have a friend who kind of tests me sometimes about them, but excuse me about that. But I'm a firm believer in boundaries. and telling people about things that upset us. And then once I've told them this, maybe one joke you can make about boundaries, but after that, if you're making jokes but you're not following the boundary being set, then we have a problem, because that's disrespect. Like, we could joke about boundary making all you want, but you still better follow the boundary. Otherwise, like the friendship or the acquaintanceship, whatever this level is that we're on, is no longer no longer beneficial to either of us, because I don't have time for people that aren't going to respect my boundaries, and nor should you. Like, respect goes both ways. No one person means more than anybody else, no matter what people try to tell you. And I told you guys this is going to be short, but I just really want to reiterate the fact that no matter what people say, no matter how you feel or about anything going on right now, respect others and treat others how you would want to be treated. And the way that you want the world to be does not negate the way somebody else experiences the world themselves. Because we are all living in one world, one country, and we are in a country that was created by the American melting pot. There are songs developed, like literally developed about that, that were made by the U.S. to like tell us like how important it is to like welcome other people that we don't know, because instead of being fearful about what this could mean, it's all about curiosity and trying to understand your fellow man, because you should love your neighbor. That's kind of the message that I'm going to leave this with. And as we all continue to go through this like stressful time, all I will say is take a moment throughout this week, take a deep breath, make sure you know when you've reached too much, and if you need to disengage after that point, that's fine. But remember to tune in the next day, because we have to like stay front and like focused and like ready. But always do the things that make sure that you're showing up for yourself, because you matter. Thank you.